transforms suffering into sacrifice. The death on Calvary was not simply a brutal and bloody execution. Jesus' death had been transformed by his self-offering in the upper room. It had become the offering of an unblemished paschal victim, the self-offering of a high priest who gave himself for the redemption of others. He is both priest and victim. For Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2. That is love, the total gift of self. The Eucharist infuses that love into us, uniting our love with Christ's, our sacrifice with his. St. Paul preached, "I appeal to you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship." Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Note that he speaks of bodies in the plural, but sacrifice in the singular. For we are many, but our sacrifice is one with Jesus' own, which is once for all. See Hebrews chapter 7, verse 27, chapter 9, verse 12, chapter 9, verse 26, and chapter 10, verse 10. Paul teaches us that the Eucharist is ordered to the cross, and the cross is ordered to the resurrection. It is the crucified and resurrected humanity of Jesus that Christians consume in Holy Communion. We come to it by way of suffering, but we receive the host as a pledge of lasting glory, and we have the grace to endure the rest. This is something we cannot appreciate fully until we have learned to see it as it was in the beginning, as it was for those first Jewish Christians who saw an old, familiar world ending and a new one descending as a heavenly Jerusalem. This beautiful book by Dr. Brant Pitre gives us all we need for that appreciation of what was, so that we can see ever more clearly what is now and ever shall be, world without end. In the world to come there is no eating or drinking, but the righteous sit with crowns on their heads, feasting on the brightness of the divine presence, as it says, "And they beheld God, and did eat and drink." Exodus chapter 24, verse 11. Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Barakoth 17a. The priests in the temple used to lift up the golden table and exhibit the bread of the presence on it to those who came up for the festivals, saying to them, "Behold God's love for you." Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Menahoth 29a. Introduction. I will never forget that day. I was a college sophomore and engaged to be married. It was a beautiful spring morning, and my future bride and I were driving through our hometown to visit her pastor to talk about the wedding. We were as happy as could be. There was just one small problem. I was a cradle Catholic, and Elizabeth was a Southern Baptist. As a result, we had our differences of opinion over how to interpret the Bible, but had come to respect each other's beliefs even where we disagreed. For this reason, we had big hopes of bringing our two families together in what we then referred to as an ecumenical wedding service, one that would be respectful of both families' traditions. Since, however, a wedding can only take place in one building, the plan was to have the service at her church, so we were on our way to see her pastor to discuss the big day. Originally, we were scheduled to have only a brief meeting with him, 15 minutes or so, in order to get his permission to celebrate the marriage there. We thought the meeting would go off without a hitch, especially since her late grandfather had been the founding pastor and built the church himself. Surely we wouldn't have any trouble getting permission to use the sanctuary. Sadly, we were mistaken, for her church had just gotten a new pastor, one we had never met. He was newly ordained, fresh out of seminary and aflame with the fire of the gospel, and, more important, he was none too friendly toward the Catholic Church. At first, the tone of our meeting was polite and conversational. However, before her pastor would agree to let us have our wedding there, he wanted to find out more about our personal beliefs. At that point, the 15-minute meeting, which was supposed to be about getting permission to use the building, turned into a nearly 3-hour theological wrestling match. For what seemed